Hello and welcome to this video in which we are going to analyze some of the movements of John Williams' guitar technique. Now this video is solely for educational purposes. It's going to kind of dissect and break down some of the ways that we can identify visually that John Williams is moving so that we can learn about guitar technique, so that we can learn about sound production, and so that we may grow as artists in the ways that we desire. Now what I've done here is taken some still shots and a few short clips with no audio from some videos that this channel called Cat Super, I like that name by the way, I have a couple cats myself, has put up. So I hope that they don't mind, but I will link the full videos in the information below. Of course, I highly recommend that you watch them. Now, I'll go ahead and say here that my personal opinion of John Williams is that he is more God than he is man when it comes to playing the guitar and making music. So if I say anything here that sounds like a criticism, it certainly is not. It is just me using my observational skills, maybe trying to break things down and just, really just wonder about what he might be doing here and what he might be going for. I think when it comes to moving your own body, producing your own sound, you may end up doing things that really don't work for anyone else. I'm all for basic rules of technique, but I think what we're going to see here really is a lot of breaking of those basic rules, and to amazing effects. So the first instance we're going to look at here is just John Williams doing a very basic free stroke with his I, M, and then A fingers. Now in this video he's just demonstrating kind of the basics of the guitar at this point, and he's just talking about how usually in classical guitar the thumb will kind of police the low 3 strings and the I, M, and A fingers kind of police strings 3, 2, and 1. So that's what he's talking about. But he gives a basic free stroke with each of these fingers, and because he's not talking about free stroke, it leads me to believe this is a great example of just sheer unconscious execution. In other words, I totally believe that this is the way that he plays the guitar because he's not even thinking about it. Now, if you've ever given or received a classical guitar lesson, in all likelihood you've talked about in free stroke, the big joint of the plucking hand is the one that drives the train, right? Many beginning students have the tendency to really come from the middle joint, kind of pull the strings up, you get a nastier sound. So as a teacher you would say, well, use that big joint, let it drive the train, that's going to give you more control, better sound, kind of everything, right? But look at the way he does these strokes. Now I watched this several times, I watched it in as slow motion as the YouTube player will let you go, and here's what I see. What I see is with the I finger, there's no movement from the big joint. It looks like it comes totally from the middle joint because the big joint doesn't move. From the M finger, I see something similar, but the big joint does move, but it seems to move after the stroke. It looks like the initiation of the stroke still comes from the middle joint, but after the stroke, the big joint lifts somehow. It's just totally fascinating to me. And then same thing there I think is happening with the A finger, maybe to a slightly greater degree. It looks like, it's kind of hard to see, but it looks like the middle joint initiates the stroke, but afterwards there's this lifting motion from the big joint of the A finger. Of course, we can only comment visually. We don't know what he's feeling here, and there may be movement of the big joint that you can't see visually. And the most fascinating thing to me that's happening here is these are impeccable, totally necessary parts of John Williams' technique that give him his amazing abilities to play and his amazing abilities to produce sound. He has one of my favorite sounds on classical guitar that I've ever heard, and it really blows my mind to kind of see that apparently a few of the points that he uses to make these amazing sounds absolutely violate what we might think of kind of commonly taught, commonly appreciated fundamentals of classical guitar technique. So this next instance is from a recording of him playing the great Aranjuez Concerto. And right here, we're in the middle of the second movement where you've got this so-called thumb cadenza, where only the guitar is playing. So if you don't know this piece, of course, you can check out the linked video below. You should listen to it. But what's happening here is John Williams is playing a melody with the thumb, and then he's playing some accompaniment type chords. So what is really fascinating about this is if you know this piece and you've played it, well, you want to play these two parts differently, right? You're going to play your melody a certain way, and then you want to color and shade and accompany with the chords. So you can listen to this and hear the effects that he gets, but technically speaking, something that I don't think I've ever seen before is the tip joint of his thumb. So I've done my best here to get some stills and slow motion shots to demonstrate. There's two different positions that he's using here, and the main thing that makes them different is the tip joint of the thumb. So when he's playing the melody, he's got a louder, deeper sound, and there's no flexing of the tip joint of the thumb. It's just kind of in its natural curvature state, right? Which you see many, many guitarists employ of all different musical styles. But watch what he does with his thumb when he goes to these kind of accompaniment type chords. He flexes the tip joint of the thumb. Now maybe this is just something that I haven't really worked with very much, but I would assume that a flexing, more tension in the tip joint of the thumb might be utilized or might produce a louder sound or a more tense type sound. I've certainly seen it used for those purposes. Like some flamenco players, you see a lot of movement and flexion of the tip joint of the thumb, and they get some amazingly loud sounds. I'm thinking of, Ruben Diaz, people like that. But in this case, John Williams utilizes this different technique for a softer, more color type of sound, which really just blows my mind. Again, maybe not something that you would think right off. Well, you want a more controlled sound, tense your tip joint of the thumb more. But obviously something that he utilizes, and it's a great contrast to the loud, deeper melody sounds in which he uses the more traditional thumb, where the tip joint is just, kind of relaxed and has that natural curvature. So this is just something that I really think is pretty funny. And especially when it comes to somebody like John Williams, because he has this reputation of impeccable, utmost disciplined classical guitar technique. One of the things that my teacher was always hard on me about, he was hard on everybody about, he was hard on himself about, was no unnecessary lifting of the fretboard hand fingers. So you don't ever see a move where the fingers shoot out even the slightest bit. And someone that would exemplify that is John Williams. If you need someone to say, hey, look at how this guy moves his fretboard hand and wastes no energy, you would point to John Williams. He'd be one of those people. But in watching this video, there are definitely multiple spots where he shoots out his fourth finger. And I just think it's funny because, if you ever get tired of hearing your teacher talk about it, I guess you could say, well, John Williams does it here and there. And in some of these passages, they don't look like very difficult passages, really. However, you can just assume that the way that he's feeling his body is just a natural move, and it actually needs to happen. I've kind of thought about this in this way. Like, have you ever seen someone eating a taco or drinking something out of a mug while sticking out their fourth finger? I mean, people do that for a reason, maybe some kind of balance. We'll talk more about the fourth finger of the other hand later. I just think it's funny because this is one of those big no-nos. And, look here, we have John Williams performing a world-famous guitar concerto with a great orchestra, playing a simple passage and sticking out his fretboard hand fourth finger a little bit more than you might think he might need to. Now here we get some really interesting, although slightly blurry, because of the vintage footage, shots of the fretboard hand thumb. And I've heard a lot of different approaches of where to put the fretboard hand thumb. Some people say behind the first finger, or second finger, or even third finger. Look at where his left hand thumb sits. It kind of sticks out. And of course, his hand position looks very fluid, very natural, very strong. So you can only assume that his thumb being in this position is totally fundamental to this technique. But visually, it looks very different. I think this is just a thing according to one's anatomy. I mean, you can't make your thumb feel relaxed in that position. Looks like to me that most people's thumb doesn't feel best in that position, and that again is just based on your own anatomy. But I think it's just an amazing example of what might work. In this case, the thumb being ahead of all the fingers, really even above the first finger, really seems to work best, even though that's not something that you see very often. So the last two things we're going to talk about here both involve rest stroke or apoyando scales. Now, I'm interested to hear if you have a different perception of this. For me, I have to go pretty far back in years to find videos of John Williams really utilizing a consistent rest stroke scale technique. Like, I basically never see him do this. I don't think it's because he can't do it. I think it's because at some point, my theory is that he stopped using this technique. Usually when I see him play a scale passage, it's free stroke, it's multiple fingers, and a combination of slurs, even using thumb in that combination as well. But you can go back and find older videos of him utilizing rest stroke exclusive IM technique. This is just something I'm really interested in because people's hands can look so different. And of course, I want to know, what does John Williams' hand look like when he does a vicious, loud, clean IM rest stroke scale passage? So this is about the best shots in this video that I could find. Now it looks like his IM scale technique is pretty traditional, kind of straight, long fingered, something that, you know, Sabikas might kind of look like that, or might kind of look like someone like Grisha Goryachev. Not really the short fingered approach that you might see Paco de Lucia or people that have that type of technique use. And of course it looks super easy, super fluid, and looks and sounds great. The second thing I want to point out about his scale technique is what the heck is going on with his pinky finger in the plucking hand. Now this is something I've made videos about, I'm pretty fascinated with. I can't really find the appropriate amount of explanation for what does the pinky finger do in your plucking hand when you're playing IM rest stroke scales. The closest thing I've found to an explanation is that some people just say you should just point it straight up and use that tension. But people do a lot of different weird things with their pinkies, and it's just so funny to me that John Williams happens to be one of these people. And what I've noticed about people who move their pinkies when they play scales is that I can't identify, in most cases, a pattern of movement. They seem to wiggle it, and obviously they need a certain type of feel, so they'll move or wiggle the pinky that way, but it's not like it will only move a certain way throughout the scale, or it will do something at the beginning or something at the end. It's more just seems totally based on feel, and although it doesn't appear to be absolutely consistent, the pinky definitely plays a role in the rest stroke scale hand position. The closest thing I think I'm observing here is when John Williams goes from low to high as he goes up the scale, and he's increasing in volume and the strings are increasing in tension. It looks like he sticks the pinky out more, or at least that can happen sometimes. But again, something that's just totally fascinating to me, because I had to go through a lot of videos of him playing all kinds of repertoire to even find a video of him utilizing this technique, and my theory is that at some point he just quit doing it for his own reasons, probably because he found something he thought was better. If you have any information on this, I would love to hear it. If you've ever heard him talk about it, or if you happen to know why he doesn't really seem to use the traditional IM rest stroke scale technique when he plays his repertoire anymore. But I just thought it was really fascinating that he's one of these weird pinky people, yet it nonetheless serves a really vital role in playing rest stroke alternating scales. So that's all we're going to talk about here in this video. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to support this channel, I'll leave links all around for you to do that via my Patreon page. I am a classical guitarist and teacher as well. So if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area, you can come see me in person for lessons, or if not, we can work together virtually. I also have a ton of instructional content on my YouTube channel and a lot more over at the A-Guitar community, where I have multiple courses available dedicated to different areas of guitar study and can also work with people on a more personal level. Oh, and I also am a composer for classical guitar. I should probably mention that, and I'll have links for my pieces also available in the information below. Thanks again for watching and have a wonderful day.